Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be discussing the AUKUS deal and why exactly many of the arguments aren't quite as good as people think. So I'm going to go through the most common arguments. Okay, so things like the cost, the reliance on the US, all that sort of stuff. That sort of thing I'm going to be discussing in this video. I'm not going to be discussing other points, and I'm not going to be challenging people with extreme views. Like if for example, they're a hardcore anti-war activist who thinks Australia should not get the AUKUS deal because warmonger, I'm not dealing with that. That's not a rational discussion because it's not going to end well. Someone's going to get angry that I oppose their opinions. I might get angry or whatever, and it just ends up in a nasty loop. So for that reason, I'm not going to be discussing the more extreme views. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Also, if you find yourselves enjoying, please leave a like and subscribe. Really helps the channel. I really need to grow this one. Like, it's difficult doing content when you're not making huge amounts of views and when you're competing with people with over 1 million subscribers to get your content seen. Yeah. So the biggest argument that people make against AUKUS is, but it costs so much. Now, the reason for this is that it slots into about 3 different areas, okay? One is that because it's not being spent on housing. 2, we could spend, this money on more submarines. And 3 is really just back to the point. It's $360 billion. Like, that's a lot of money. Okay? Like, that's the reality of it. Like it or not, that is very expensive. I believe it's a good deal. I think it's decent enough. But there are genuine concerns within that. Then, of course, I'll be just going into the increased influence of the United States, and the smaller bits as well as, potentially raising tensions with countries like China. So let's just get on with it from here. Basically, the cost for me isn't a huge issue, okay? So here's the main reason. So regarding the argument about why isn't it spent on housing or supporting people in this cost of living crisis, I need to make it clear it never was going to be spent on that, okay? Like, this is the thing. We have had consecutive governments, state and federal, right? Labor, the Greens, the Greens don't have the balance of power by any regard, but, even their sort of stuff, they haven't really solved any problems. Labor, the Greens, Liberals, National, all those guys, no one has actually fixed the issues. None of these problems have been solved, and many of these parties have sat around complaining about the other guys' work and sitting around complaining about how you're screwing up our economy, and then conveniently forgetting the fact that they didn't actually do anything anyway. Yeah, that's right. This is what I need to make clear. This is not a political attack on anyone, okay? But the thing is that you have to understand is that ultimately this money was never going to go into things like cost of living, okay? That's the reality of it. It was never going to go into cost of living. It was never going to go into housing. If we didn't spend this money on the AUKUS deal, it likely would have gone into giving the 1% more cuts in their taxes. It would have given people with much more money, the big businesses and the big corporate stuff, much greater tax cuts. It would have reduced the amount of money that they have to pay. It would go into their subsidies and all that sort of stuff. Very little of it, and this is the thing, I genuinely doubt any of it would have gone into meaningful investment into the country, beyond very basic tax cuts for people. And most of those people that would be receiving them, again, would be like the 1%. Next of all, we come to the thing about it that we could just buy more submarines. You see, there's an issue with that. It's that we can't do that. You see, a lot of people sit around confused as to why Australia doesn't just buy 25 Japanese submarines. Well, the answer is because, there's too many of them, right? Like, this is the thing. With the full AUKUS deal, right, say we get 12 submarines, right, because that's what we'll get. We'll get about 12 submarines, so 4 Virginia class, and about 8 SSN AUKUS. That's what the deal is at the moment. But let's say we're operating all of them at once. We will have 12 submarines, which comes to, I apologize, it's been 10 seconds. Estimates with that, they'll have about 120 people on board. This comes to about 1,440. Now we come to the 25 Japanese submarines with 70 people on board. You have to have 1,750 people. That's over 350 people more than what we would have with all of our AUKUS submarines running at once. And the thing is, and what I need to make clear, is that ultimately, we're not going to do that. We can't do that. Australia won't be able to run that amount of people. Like, we are barely meeting. Like, this is the thing a lot of people don't understand. We are losing people from our military. We aren't meeting the recruitment goals. We aren't meeting any of that. And this is a big systemic issue I might talk about in a whole different video. The thing is, we are not getting enough people in as it is into our military. Let alone enough people to buy 25 new submarines. Then, of course, people, when they talk about how much cheaper this will be, they miss the point that these 25 submarines, whilst we can't actually man them at all, because we don't have enough people, the second big point is that we won't be getting as good of a deal. These submarines aren't as powerful. They have to snort. They have to come up to the surface. They cannot stay underwater for as long. This means that they are much more vulnerable to anti-submarine warfare assets and opponents hunting our ships down. That's a big thing. Then, of course, you got to take into account that it's a diesel-electric submarine. So not only do you have to factor in the upgrades, the life-to-type extension upgrades that every single ship undergoes at some point, but you also have to factor in fuel costs, as well as fuel limitations, meaning that your submarines, yes, you have 25 of them, but they're all burning huge amounts of diesel to keep running. On the other hand, a nuclear submarine only needs refueling once every 30 years or so. You're not going to be dealing with the same situation. It's a whole different story. And this is one of the big issues with that argument. Then, of course, we come to the next big point, which is the fact that it costs $360 billion. And that's not very good. However, I do need to make this clear, right? That is over a course of 30 or so years. This deal is going until 2055, I believe. So that actually comes closer to $12 billion a year, which is much more reasonable when you discuss it. And I need to make it clear, it's also building the facilities to manufacture these ships, these submarines. It's building the facilities to maintain them, train the crews, get a whole different industry, right? Because here in Australia, we only have, I believe, 30 or so nuclear technicians. This could be completely wrong, but this is what I remember. We had 30 or so nuclear technicians being given the qualifications from our universities. We have to boost that to a very large number. We also have to deal with all the recruitment costs and all that sort of stuff. So by the time you start looking at it, $360 billion over a course of 30 years, right? Well, 32 years at the moment. Costing that, paying for 8 submarines that aren't built yet, and the Virginia class are coming somewhere about $9 billion per ship, so that's reasonable. The thing is, once you factor all that in, you're suddenly looking at a much less unreasonable price. And that's the big thing you got to understand, okay? It's that at the end of the day, whilst it is a huge amount of money, it doesn't mean that's necessarily going into the wrong area. And just for context, so everyone knows, that comes to about, I apologize, just doing some calculations, that comes to about $32 million per day in terms of spending. It's a lot. But the thing is, though, is it's not a lump sum that people seem to think, where it's one big payment per thing. It's a payment for the whole program, the whole expansion of our industry and everything like that. Then we come to the other argument, that it increases American and British influence over Australia. Now, this is a really interesting argument because, well, I mean, we have a history of America taking advantage of us. I mean, where they've dragged us into wars that we really probably shouldn't be. I mean, anyone remember that little funny conflict in Afghanistan or the war in Vietnam, So I do get that argument, and it is very reasonable. What I would say with that, though, is that this is also a sovereign capacity. We are building ourselves a capacity where we can produce our own submarines. The thing is that these reactor systems, for example, they will last the lifetime of the sub very often. And unless I'm missing something, they shouldn't be needing replacement at all. This is a really big issue that a lot of people kind of, I think it's a bit overhyped, but it also is very reasonable too. Again, like, I'm not going to discredit this one. It is very, very rational to look at this and go, are you sure they're not getting unreasonable amounts of influence over us? What I would say though is that it's worth it for them because it means they get an ally that has nuclear submarines. We become much more powerful, we become much more dangerous to a potential adversary. What I'd add though is that it doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to control us, because at the end of the day, it's our ships, it's our submarines, it's our crew. And this is what I'd probably go and say. They'd have the same amount of influence over us that Navashia does. You know, the Spanish building company for our air warfare destroyers, or BAE Systems. That's the reality of it. And the thing is that ultimately, at the end of the day, most of our military belongs to America and Britain anyway. Like the F-35s, those built by America. Most of the parts are from America. Like, if you're really that concerned about foreign influence, then we have to have this whole different discussion. It's not just submarines. It's, we need to be able to produce all our stuff here in Australia without anyone's assistance. And that's a big thing. Anduril, the guys making our autonomous underwater vessels. The Boeing, the ones who are designing the Ghost Bat or the Loyal Wingman. All these sorts of assets are overseas owned. Like, they're from overseas companies and they belong to other nations that are not Australia. So it is a bit of a iffy one, because at the end of the day, it just comes into, if you don't want more American influence, or you're against American influence, there's more issues than just the subs. Okay, but the thing is, most has been raised specifically about submarines. So now that's out of the road, we'll be discussing is it aggressive towards China? My answer is not really. Okay, like, this is the thing about submarines. It's that it allows us to protect our trade routes and where we want to go. China only needs to be concerned about this, and what I need to make clear, and this is my opinion on defense, and this is my opinion on doctrine, is China only needs to be concerned about this if they are going to be a threat to Australia. That's the reality of it. If China intends to start a conflict, then they should be concerned. However, if they are going to consider this as a law-abiding global citizen that does their job properly, that doesn't attack other nations, doesn't try and violate rights, then what's the reason for them to be concerned? I understand countries in close proximity to Australia that making these arguments, but ultimately at the end of the day, a conflict with China is only going to occur if something goes drastically wrong. And the thing is, what you have to understand, and this is again a whole different video that I need to talk on, but the thing is, it's not strategically in China's strategic interest to take Taiwan. It's not what they want. However, China also has a large fleet of submarines. They have over 72 submarines, many of which are nuclear powered, and many are capable of carrying nuclear weapons. China can hit Australia, right? Just so you understand. They can hit Australia wherever they want, if they want. China's argument that we are threatening them is not reasonable. We're not threatening China. We are simply getting the ability to hit back if we get hit. That's my opinion on the matter. But yeah. Honestly, that's really it for now. I hope you guys really enjoyed the video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It greatly helps, and I really appreciate any contribution, particularly subscriptions. Like, it really helps the channel. Again, I can't say how much it helps. Like, it is very difficult being a smaller content creator and having to compete with bigger guys, But yeah, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much. Bye.